This is Alabama Politics with Steve Flowers, an in-depth interview with Alabama's top political newsmakers. Now, from the studios of Troy University, here is Steve Flowers.
I'm Steve Flowers, and welcome to Alabama Politics. Folks, we're fortunate tonight to have as our guest one of the distinguished judges on the Court of Civil Appeals, Judge Chad Hanson. And I've known Chad a few years. He's a great man and a great leader in the state. I've had a couple, sort of a year of judges on the show, as you might recall. I've had a lot of the Supreme Court judges, Judge Kelly Wise and Tom Parker, and several others have been on the show this year. So, come with Mary Wyndham from the Court of Civil Appeals, but Judge Hanson is the first civil court of appeals we had on here. And we're glad to have him on the show. Chad, good to have you on the show.
Thank you for having me, Steve.
You're a good man, and I've heard a lot of good things about you over the years. And you are on the Court of Civil Appeals. Now, remind me of this. It's a 6-year term.
Correct.
But now, were you first elected in 18 or before that?
I was elected in 2018 and took the seat in 2019.
Right. So this is your first term then?
Yes, sir.
So there's a lot of y'all will run for re-election in 2024. There's several on the Supreme Court. I know Mike Boland, who is my longtime friend, can't run this year. He's not running this year in 2022.
Correct.
And then Kelly Wise is up this year, I believe. She and Judge Boland's seat are the two that are up.
Yes, sir. And
then in 2024, there's about 4 or 5. Do you know Tom Parker and I go so far back that we went to Boys State together?
Do you? Wow.
We're the same age. I grew up in Troy, and Tom grew up here in Montgomery at Sidney near High School, and we went to Boys State together. He always reminds me that we were there together. I ran for governor and didn't win, but Tom said I was your campaign manager in City 7. So remind him that when you go back over to the court.
Well, he'll be aging out in 24.
I know.
So that'll be kind of the hot race, I think, in 24 for the Chief Justice.
It will
of the
be,
court.
yeah.
Yes, sir.
It sure will. Shanna, you live in Trussville in Jefferson County, which is one of the fastest growing suburbs in the state and a prominent suburbs. But now, you tell me about growing up. I didn't know this till you got here to the show. Tell us about viewers about growing up in Maine. Wouldn't that be a wonderful life to grow up in Maine?
Yes, sir. I was born and raised in Maine. My whole family's from that area originally, and grew up through high school. When high school was over, I decided I wanted to make a change and kind of go somewhere else. Maine's if you've ever been there, especially at that time in the early 90s, is very isolated. You got Canada to the north and west, the North Atlantic Ocean, very unforgiving to the east.
Yeah.
And New Hampshire to the south, one road in, one road out. So when I graduated, I decided I wanted to kind of go out, make my own way. Picked the University of Alabama. Surprisingly enough, I'd never stepped foot in the state.
How did you tell us about how you picked Alabama?
I just wanted to go somewhere different, somewhere south. I've always kind of been intrigued by the South at that time, and I'd never visited the state, never visited the campus. Kind of packed up a car and went. And I remember before I left, my mom was, of course, upset and crying on the front doorstep. And I asked her, "Mom, what's wrong?" She says, "Well, I know what's going to happen. You're gonna meet a girl. You're going to get married, and you're never going to come back."
And that's what happened.
And that's what happened. But of course, I have been back to visit my mother several times. But
did you meet your wife at the University of Alabama?
I did. Met my wife, the former Joy Gentry. She's from the Birmingham area, so here we are.
That's
today.
how y'all kind of decided to settle in Birmingham, probably.
Yes, sir. We we kind of looked around, and I had such a great time at the University of Alabama. I can't tell you, especially being so far from home. The people were just so good to me. A lot of times I couldn't get home for fall breaks and holidays and whatnot. And the amount of people who took me in and treated me like their own son over that time, there's really nowhere else I wanted to be.
So you just packed up and came to Alabama. But you said that at that time they must not charge the kind of tuition they charge now, because I think Alabama charges those out-of-state students 3 times the regular rate. It was still higher, wasn't it? But it wasn't 3 times the rate.
Well, no, it was really affordable back then. I think there were more state funds to offset the tuition. But at that time, it was cheaper for me to go to Alabama as an out-of-state student than it was to go to my own in-state institution, which I know is hard for folks to
Where
fathom.
would you have looked at it in Maine to go to undergraduate school?
Well, the flagship university is the University of Maine.
Where is it located?
That's in Orono, Maine, kind of in the northern part of the state.
Well, you know, Judge, that I remember Margaret Chase Smith was a senator. Wasn't she the senator from there a long time? Or no, yeah. Margaret, who was a Republican senator?
Yeah, it was Margaret Chase Smith. Yeah, she was a big senator in the 50s from Maine, and I think she's famous for finally standing up to McCarthy during the whole McCarthyism era in Washington.
There were some other great senators from Maine.
There was. It's George Mitchell in the early 90s. He was the majority leader of the Senate, and Ed Muskie.
Muskie, that's right, ran for president.
Yeah, ran for president. I think he was later on Secretary of State under Carter.
Right.
So, and of course, I think we had Hannibal Hamlin, who was vice president to Lincoln back in the 1860s. So.
Well, did you grow up liking politics?
I did, yeah. I've always been interested in it. I remember probably my first exposure to politics was my parents took me to the JFK Library in Boston. If you've ever been there, it sits on Columbia Point, right on Boston Harbor. I remember vividly going as a 10-year-old or 11-year-old. I'm not sure how old I was, but it was a gray day. I remember the sea was churning, and I didn't know what a Republican or Democrat was.
Were you 11 years old?
Yeah, about 11 years old. And if you've ever been to the JFK Library, it has a soaring kind of 3 to 4 story atrium, glass atrium. You walk in, there's, of course, huge pictures of the JFK, and you get immersed in kind of the soaring rhetoric that he used. You know, ask not what your country can do for you, but what you can do for your country. And we're going to put a man on the moon in 10 years. And so you become really inspired as you're walking through the museums. And of course, at the end, you learn about the assassination and the tragedy of that. You know, young wife widowed, you know, 2 small kids without a father. And so I remember leaving that museum, and again, it's with an overall feeling of, you know, inspiration and also sorrow and tragedy. You know, and I think the weather probably played a part because it was a gray day and starting to rain. But you know, ultimately, I think that's kind of a metaphor for politics. You know, it can be inspiring and tragic all at the same time. But that was really my first exposure. And of course, the next big race after that was '88, George Bush. And George Bush lived in Maine, or had a summer home in Maine anyway. So he was right down the road, and I figured, hey, he's a Republican, I'm a Republican. He's my guy. So that's kind of my first exposure to politics.
That's right. Kennebunkport, Maine was a great, the exclusive vacation place.
That's right.
The Bushes had a place up there. That's right, Kennebunkport, Maine. You know, so what year were you born? If you were, I hate to ask you how old you are, but
I was born in '73. Yep.
So you're not but
47. Now.
47 years old. So you were if you were born in 73.
Correct. Yep.
Then it was 84 when you went to that museum.
That's right. Yep.
But see, I'm so old, I remember it. I remember the day John Kennedy was shot.
Wow.
I remember where you were. It was one of those days, almost like 9/11. You know, when people remember where they were. I remember I was in the 7th grade in Troy, Alabama. I remember with my class, Miss Dotson, and everything. That was a day you remember, and I never have had a sadder experience in watching the little John Kennedy boy, the little boy. I mean, that was so sad, his daddy being killed like that. And I mean, everybody turned the televisions on and watched it. Television was almost a new medium at that time.
Yeah, and of course.
But I lived through that. I lived that. What you saw on a thing at the John Kennedy Library, I saw it.
Right. And of course, in this state, I mean, you can't if you love politics like you and I do. I know we've discussed in the past, but the colorful cast of characters we've had just in the governor's office. Of course, colorful characters always make for good stories. But you know, going back to Jim Folsom, the '46 race, where he traveled the state with the strawberry pickers.
Oh yeah.
And on a platform of populism, and beat the big mules in Birmingham, Montgomery, then all the way up to Patterson in '58 with Wallace. They couldn't succeed themselves at that time. Patterson wins.
Right.
Wallace comes back in '62 to claim the spot. He can't run again, so Patterson tries to come back. Gets beaten by Lurleen, I believe.
You must have read my book.
Yeah, comes back and loses to Lurleen. Then Lurleen dies in office, and I think, and poor Albert Brewer tried to sworn as lieutenant governor, tries to claim it on his own right, and usually lose to, of course, Wallace, in '70. But it's really colorful history. Maybe only second to Louisiana. I'd argue Alabama. I think.
Yeah, I don't think we got a colorful history, but I don't think Louisiana can be compared to anybody else. Chad, you've got a good memory for things, but let me tell you, when you mentioned Kennebunkport, Maine, and you mentioned colorful characters, it reminded me of a story, if you don't mind me telling it. We had the most colorful U.S. senator named Howell Heflin. We called him Judge because he had been the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court, and he was the one who passed the judicial article. Our judicial system in Alabama was very archaic. Our circuit judges weren't getting paid anything. We had no, it was just a very poor system. He went on a limb, got elected to Chief Justice in 1970, the year that Wallace and Brewer had that governor's race. And he beat a pretty good field, but Heflin was a great, great man. I'm talking about, we all called him Judge. He was 50 years old before he ran for the Supreme Court. He'd had a very, very prominent practice up there in Tuscumbia. His daddy was a Methodist minister, and he was just a salt of the earth. He was a real World War II hero, Chad.
Yes, sir.
He was a Marine. But anyway, that judicial building is named for him that you serve in.
Right. He
and Bo Torbert, who followed him as Chief Justice. But Judge Heflin had the most unbelievable repertoire of jokes you've ever seen. And actually, he and Ted Kennedy were best friends.
Yeah, I've heard that. Yep.
People don't know that, but most people don't know that. But he didn't tell the whole world that he and Kennedy were good friends. They both served on the Judiciary Committee. Heflin went on the Judiciary, of course, because he'd been Chief Justice. But he went to the Senate in '76. But he was going to run for re-election, and at that time, even if we sort of leaned being Republican, and those of us who were in politics, we all ran as Democrats. Now, Heflin was a real Democrat, but he was a North Alabama New Deal Democrat, but we were good friends, and he asked me in he served, it was for his running for his third term, and it had been '86, I was already in the legislature. He says, Tree, he called me Tree, my nickname, he says, Tree, I want you to be my Wiregrass South Alabama campaign manager. And I said, Judge, I'll do that. I don't think I'm going to get an opponent in my legislative race, so I'll do that. And he got, he drew an opponent who was a Republican named Bill Cabness. You know, Bill Cabness was from a very silk-stocking family there in Birmingham. His grandfather started the old Cabness Johnson law firm, and they were a real wealthy family. He had a big old house in Mountain Brook, but Bill Cabness was so rich that he also had a summer home in Kennebunkport, Maine.
Is that right?
Yeah, the Cabnesses in Birmingham and their house was next to the George Bushes, right next to Bush's. And so he grew up being George Bush's best friend. That's why when he left, but Bill Cabness was in the state Senate with me, and he was one of the finest men I knew, but a Republican couldn't win back then. And he was such a gentleman, such a wealthy person, that he had that Mountain Brook tied around his neck, which is not good for running for statewide office, as you know, to be from Mountain Brook. And so Heflin had garnered the best political people in the country. It was Bob Squire and Eskew who were the best Democratic pollsters and media people in the country. And they had run Clinton's campaign for president. And he'd been a Democratic Senate incumbent. He had Squire and Eskew, and he called me on the phone one day. He says, Trey, he called it Trey. He said, Trey, I want you to come up here to Washington and meet Squire and Eskew since you're going to be my Wiregrass campaign manager. And I said, okay, Judge, I'd like to do that. And so I flew to Washington. We met with Squire and Eskew. They were planning his strategy. And you probably know this, having run statewide. If you're an incumbent and you've got all the money and name ID, those political gurus like Squire and Eskew, they want to identify their opponent negatively. That's the rule of thumb.
That's right.
Is you got to say something, find something bad about them, and you got to identify them before they get known negatively. Well, they said, now, Judge, you know, we're going to have to take your opponent and you're going to have to crucify him. You know, we're going to have to take him to the woodshed. We're going to find some things about him. And George Bill Cabness was one of the finest gentlemen ever served, so I don't think they could find anything about him. But Heflin said that old dog Trey, he said, y'all ain't going to have to do any research. Y'all tell y'all what you're going to do. We're going to call my opponent Mr. Cabanis. We're going to call him Cabanis. And we're going to say, we ain't going to say bad things about his personal life. We're just going to say Mr. Cabanis is one of those Gucci shoe wearing, Rolex watch wearing, Kennebunkport, Maine vacationing, Grey Poupon mustard dipping, Mercedes driving, Mountain Brook Republicans. He wasn't going to be a trustful or Aniana Republican. He was going to be a Mountain Brook Republican. I didn't mean to take up your time, but did you ever heard that story?
I think I might have read it in your book.
He sent me through the wiregrass. He says, Tree, I want you to tell all those farmers in the wiregrass, every speech I gave for Heffen, I had to say, well, you know, this guy in Birmingham's running against Judge Heffen, and Heffen has single-handedly saved the peanut program. As chairman of agriculture, man. I didn't mean to take up your time with that, but that Kennebunkport, Maine vacation grew. Got me thinking about that. Old Heffen was colorful.
Well, he really is, and most people know him as a senator, but you know, as a judge and the Chief Justice of the Alabama Supreme Court, whose job also is the head administrator of the Alabama court system, Judge Heflin was really credited with, as you said, kind of bringing the system, just having model rules for wherever you go. So if you were in Jefferson County, you could practice in Baldwin County and not just be smacked in the head with some different rules or anything like that. So he really brought our court system into the 21st century.
Judge, tell me about your wife, Joy. Y'all got married and you went on to law school, and does she have a career, teach school, anything?
She did. She's an RN in Birmingham. She's focused primarily on neonatal intensive care.
What hospitals does she work out of?
She's worked in Children's in the past, Brookwood Hospital, and now she works for a place called Solutions Infusion Therapy in Birmingham. So if you have a sick child or that needs to be on IVs after they leave the hospital, she'll come to your home and administer those for you.
Y'all have two daughters, 15 and 10.
15 and 10, about to be 16 and 11 here in about a month or so. So we're blessed with them.
Do they go to Hewitt Trustful High School?
Yep. The oldest is Hewitt Trustful High School, and the youngest is at Payne Elementary.
Boy, I'm gonna tell you, that Hewitt Trustful has grown so much. It's probably the best football program in the state now, and Thompson.
Yeah, they were always in the top 3 the last couple of years. We've had trouble getting past Thompson past couple of years, and Hoover.
Y'all in the same area?
Yeah, same. I think it's Region 7. I think it's called. Yep. But
that's a tough region.
It's a tough region.
Is Mountain Brook in that region?
Yes, they are.
Vestavia.
Vestavia.
I noticed in your resume, Judge, you helped start the Vestavia Civitan Club. I always thought that was Jabo's club.
Well, Jabo is one of the co-founders with me, but undisputedly, he's kind of our, he was our leader.
I'm actually a titular member of that club.
Oh, are you? Okay,
yeah, I go on Fridays sometimes with Jabo, because Jabo's one of my best friends.
Yeah.
We serve in the House and legislature together, and we've remained, Maryland and Jabo are two of my best friends. And Jabo, I just call it Jabo's Civitan Club. It's like he invites everybody to come to it and everything.
Well, you're not too far off on that, yeah. But,
so you were one of the co-founders. How'd you get to be doing that with Jabo?
Well, a law partner of mine, Dee Hutzler, he's a well-known Civitan in the Birmingham area, so I was in his office at the time, and he got me into it, starting a bunch of different clubs. So we'd start one in Vestavia, then we'd go out to Trustville and start one. So we're
Did Jabo, y'all go to Jabo and say, y'all want you to start a Civitan? His daddy was a Civitan.
Yeah, he'd always been involved in Civitan, through his dad and whatnot, so he's one of the first doors we knocked on. It's like, hey,
what do you say? Oh, yeah, I'll do it.
Sure, yeah, we'll do it.
At the Vestavia Country Club.
Yep, that's correct.
Do you ever go to it sometime?
It's been a while, since I've moved kind of out of that area, but I'm just happy to know it's still going strong.
Yeah. Now tell our viewers about the court system back to Judge Heffen organized and everything. There are 9 members of the state Supreme Court.
Correct. Yep.
And there's 5 on the Civil Court of Appeals where you served, and 5 on the criminal. Tell our viewers who all's on the Civil Court of Appeals with you.
We got the presiding judge,
Bill
Thompson. He's presiding out of seniority, so he's been on the court the longest. We have Terry Moore out of Mobile, who's really probably the most academic on the court. He wrote the book on workers' comp that pretty much every
what was his background? He practiced law down in Mobile?
Yeah, he practiced law in Mobile and specialized in workers' comp and has written books on it, and every practitioner in the state.
Well, that's perfect. He's on the court then.
That's correct.
I mean, because y'all get some appeals on.
Oh, yeah, we get a lot of appeals.
On workers' comp.
Yes, sir.
Well, that's good he has that specialty.
It is, yeah, and it's a great resource. And
is this his second or first term?
He's in his 3rd now.
Third term?
Third term, yes, sir. And
when is he up for again?
He'll be in 24. We're on the
Same
same
as you.
cycle.
Okay.
Same cycle.
So you're on there, Chad Hanson, Terry Moore, Bill Thompson.
Bill Thompson.
Now Bill's serving his like third or fourth term, isn't he?
I think this might be going on his fifth.
I think
term.
it is too.
Yeah, fifth term. So
He lives in Homewood.
lives in Homewood, and he does a great job in the court. You know, of course, his job as presiding judge is to administer the resources of the court, and he's a great steward of the people's money, and does a great job, make sure we stay functioning. And
now you're on that. Matt Friday just came on there.
Matt Friday, he was from Montevallo, and I think he served 2 terms in the legislature from Shelby County. And he had clerked previously on the Court of Civil Appeals, so he's been a great addition. He's been on about a year now.
Is Matt from Shelby County originally?
I think he's from the Birmingham area.
From that area, huh?
Yeah, not exactly Shelby County, but I know he went to the University of Montevallo undergrad. I think he met his wife there, who's from that area. So.
Who's the fifth one now?
Christy Edwards.
Christy, yeah, she
Christy.
Just came on there.
Yeah, from
Montgomery.
From Pike Road, and she was on the Alabama Tax Court. Prior
That's
to,
right.
and she's on my cycle too, 24.
So how many? There's 3 of y'all up in 24.
3. Yep, 3 of us up.
You, Christy Edwards, and
Terry Moore.
Yeah, y'all came. You and Chris came on the same year, 18.
That's correct.
Well, I tell you one thing. Christy works at Alpha endorsement. She was. I was at an Alpha thing the other night, and she was there. They endorsed you last time, didn't they?
After I won, the primary.
Okay.
but there are a lot of great people over there.
Who ran against you in 18?
Well, I ran against
an incumbent.
An incumbent, yep. And I got outspent a good deal, but I worked the state, got out, and I tried to go visit as many clubs as I could. And kind of getting back to my love of politics, I always had in the back of my mind, I was kind of traveling those back country roads late at night, that Jim Folsom did this, Patterson did this, Wallace did that. So it was fun just to be a small part of just kind of statewide electoral politics.
And you met my daughter Jenny when you were running with Carl.
I met her, yeah,
Hey, Carl Allison.
Great lawyer, Carl Allison. Yes, sir.
Jenny and I are very close. Jenny actually edits my column.
Is that right?
When I first started writing this column, she wanted to make a little extra money, and so she and I still do it. I'm very technically ignorant, and so I don't know how to send out anything, but I hand write the columns, and then it's typed, and Jenny and I go over them a couple of times. She's my editor for typographical or grammatical things, and then she sends it out to all the papers in the state.
Wow.
So she's my editor. So when you see her, I'm gonna text her as soon as we get off the air and tell her I've had a good visit with you.
Yes, sir.
But now, do you think your daughters will wind up going to Alabama like you enjoy? Are they big Alabama fans?
Yeah, they're big Alabama fans. They've talked, as long as it's not Auburn, I guess. Can I say that? But no. My youngest one, I'm not sure where she's going to end up.
She's just 11 years old.
Yeah, she's 11 years, but my daughter now, she's a sophomore in high school. She's certainly starting to think about it. But there's so many great schools in the state.
There are.
I want to have a look at some of the smaller schools as well, Troy and Jacksonville State, and there's so much to offer. The state has to offer.
At that age, have they shown an inclination as to what they're interested in, like law or politics or nursing, like your wife, or have they? It's just too early to tell.
Yeah, I think it's kind of early. She's, of course, I think she likes politics. She likes to talk about it and likes to talk about the current events and things like that. But whatever. As we always say, whatever she does, as long as she's happy, we'll be happy too.
What station do y'all watch for your local news up there in Birmingham? 6 or 3340?
Yeah,
I'm on CBS 42.
Are you? Yeah. I've seen you on CBS 42 giving your analysis on races and things like that. We're usually in the mornings. So I don't watch much at night, but usually in the mornings for whatever reason, it's always on Fox 6.
Yeah, everybody 6 I think dominates the market.
Yeah, in fact, I think I read somewhere that it has the highest ratings of any Fox station in the country.
I think it does.
Yeah.
It's by far the most watched station in the state.
Right.
But anyway, I didn't mean to get off on that. Tell me this: are you planning? Have you already had to start? When can you? Of course, that's 3 years away before you run again on that thing. What kind of cases do y'all get mostly on appeals? Would it be workers' comp or large personal injury? Would it be the biggest, hardest cases, wouldn't it?
Yeah, well, our jurisdiction with the court, what we hear as a court is workers' compensation, anything under $50,000 in amount in current controversy.
So y'all, the big personal injury goes straight to the Supreme Court?
Straight to the Supreme Court.
I did not know that.
So we're only under $50,000 here, like all divorce appeals, administrative appeals. So if a teacher gets fired, she's unhappy with the result, she can sometimes appeal to our court. Probably the most of what we get is probably juvenile cases, whether it's juvenile dependency or termination of parental rights.
Oh, is that so? So
sadly, yeah,
domestic stuff is would be would be more domestic than workers' comp.
Correct. Yeah. So sadly, you know, a lot of what we're dealing with is termination of parental rights, or folks aren't doing right by their kids, and the state comes in and terminates the rights, takes the kids into foster care and things of that nature.
You know, that's an expensive thing for people to take lawyers and go all the way to the Court of Civil Appeals with that.
It is.
They have to go to the bank, borrow money.
Well, a lot of times, especially in termination of parental rights, you can have a lawyer appointed to you. So you have adequate representation.
Okay, so people who just don't have a lot of money can have the means to appeal.
Correct.
Those cases. And so out of the domestic cases, when you have that, would the majority of them have appointed counsel, you think?
A majority of them, yeah.
Is that right?
Cases no tape, yep. So
the state pays that fee for someone to be represented.
Yes, sir.
Like that.
Because really, when you think about it, a termination of parental rights case is really almost the equivalent of like a death penalty case, because there's nothing more the state can do than come in and take your children from you.
Right.
You know what I mean? So, you know, the people of this state have, you know, decided it's wise to afford counsel to those people.
Well, Judge, I hate to tell you this, but our time's up. It goes by in a hurry when you're having fun.
Sir.
I apologize about taking so much of your time telling you that Hanson story, but it just intrigued me about talking about colorful characters in Kennyport, Maine.
I could listen to them all day. So I enjoyed it. Yeah.
Folks, I want to tell you how much I appreciate Judge Chad Hanson being with us tonight. He is a gem of a judge and a great gentleman. Judge Chad Hanson on the Court of Civil Appeals, we thank him for being with us, and we thank you viewers for watching, and hope you tune again next week for Alabama Politics. Thank you so much.